Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to an episode of Is This Deck Good? And today we are going to be talking about Elemental Heroes. Now, Elemental Heroes have been a very popular deck recently, and it's a very good deck, and it will have a really good chance in September if they don't get hit too hard, which I don't think they'll get too hard. There might be like one or two cards that they'll hit. But that said, let's get started and talk about is this deck good? And we're going to go over a whole bunch of different subjects, and that can decide if you want to actually look into building this deck yourself or testing it out on Dueling Network or any other place you can test decks. So, first off, we're going to talk, is this deck expensive? And I would say no, this deck is not that expensive. I mean, Stratos has been reprinted several times, Miracle Fusion got reprinted in the raw packs, Zero and Shining also got their reprints, and a lot of this stuff just got reprinted. The only card that hasn't been reprinted, and it comes in common anyways, is just Bubble Man. But other than that, everything is relatively inexpensive, and even Super Poly got reprinted as a secret rare, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, I'd say this deck is relatively inexpensive to make, but if you want to run cards like maybe Blade Armor Ninja, or like Elemental Hero Nova Master, those cards in the extra deck, they will be kind of pricey. I mean, it's not too expensive, but pretty much the only cards I would say that you absolutely need to have in your extra deck are pretty much the Shining and Absolute Zero. Other than that, you don't have to have them, but it'll just kind of improve your options that you can go for during game. Next up, I want to talk about going first in E-Heroes. Now, E-Heroes is not a stun deck unless you're playing a skill drain variant. There's so many different ways to play E-Heroes, but I'm going to be talking about the variant that I was playing, like an XYZ variant, which is the most common one seen that people are playing. And basically, I mean, going first in this deck is go for Stratos, go add an E-Hero, maybe Bubble Man if you want to go for an Exceed. But generally, you're going to go for first turn Stratos, add an Alias, maybe set any back row if you do, and then Stratos usually dies relatively quick. But pretty much the deck doesn't have to go first, and that's what's really good about E-Heroes. Is going first is very important in Yu-Gi-Oh! I would say for some decks like Wind-Ups or Dino Rabbit, those really excel at going first, because if you set your hand, they can't loop you, or against Dino Rabbits, if you have a big monster out first turn. I know when I play against Dino Rabbits and I'm playing Heroes, I like to make a huge monster first turn and then have them try to deal with it, and that can be problematic for them. But yeah, I would say going first is not an important factor in the Heroes. Next up, I want to talk about difficulty. Now, first off, I just want to let you guys know that Miracle Fusion is not a cost, just as a ruling to help you guys. That means that if I activate Miracle Fusion and you Solemn Judgment or Solemn Warning or stop this card with like Magic Jammer, I do not banish my heroes. They still stay in the grave or on the field because it's not a cost. Miracle Fusion is not a cost. And that's what's really good with E-Heroes is the deck is relatively, I would say, simple to play. The only thing I would say is kind of difficult for some players, maybe just getting into like Yu-Gi-Oh! And checking out E-Heroes, is you have to know when to activate Gemini Spark. This card really helps out heroes. It helps them deal with things that they can't deal with, like if they don't play Skill Drain and they're playing an opponent deck that runs like Beast King Skill Drain. This card is a very key card, and you have to know when to play this. Other than that, I mean, most of the stuff that you go for the Miracle Fusion, which is a card that you can run 3 of at the moment, it's just really good, as well as Super Poly. This is another really good card. And when you end up making cards like Absolute Zero or the Shining, which is the most important ones, you'll net an advantage by going with those cards if they, go off the field. So, except for when the Shining gets banished, like if he gets Dimensional Prison or Bottomless, he will get his effect when he's destroyed. And also keep in mind that he can miss timing. So if this card is targeted by Raikou, it will miss the timing. But generally, Shining will always net you an advantage card, because once he goes to the grave, you get to add to your banished E-Heroes, which generally will be the cards you use when you activate a Miracle Fusion. But what I'm saying is the deck is relatively simple, because when you activate your Miracle Fusion and they negate it or they get rid of your monster, you still net a kind of an advantage, if you understand what I'm talking about, because you get an advantage after the monster goes away. Like if Absolute Zero goes away, he just leaves the field, they even compulse it, Absolute Zero gets its effect, and if they get rid of Shining, other than getting banished or forcing him to miss the timing, he'll get his effect. So I would say the deck is relatively simple to play, but keep in mind the Gemini Spark is the only card that I would say that can be slightly difficult. You have to know what you're playing against and what key cards that you have to use Gemini Spark against. So just keep that in mind. So I would say it's a relatively easy deck. The only card you have to remember is I don't see why you wouldn't want to play the Gemini Spark variant, but Gemini Spark is just really good, and it's probably one of the my favorite cards in E-Heroes, because it allows you to have options, and it's technically a +1 if you play it right. Also, Hero Blast is a really good card, and that's a relatively simple card to use as well. And next up, I want to talk about, can this deck top? Well, this deck has been topping all the time in Japan. And once we get that other card, well, right now, we have Blade Armor Ninja, which can technically hit for 4,400 if it attacks twice. The Heroic Champion Excalibur, which is coming out, which is a rank 4 Exceed that requires 2 level 4 monsters, which E-Heroes can make like crazy. It'll be a lot better, and I would say that, this deck does have potential to top already, and it has already topped several times, and E-Heroes do have great potential in the future, I would say, to top, and because I don't think they'll get hit too bad by the September list. Next up, what I want to talk about is top decking in this deck. Now, you have basically 3 Miracle Fusions in your deck, but after you go through all of them, there's not really much top decking. So I would say, yes, this deck can top deck very well, but you'll have to top deck Miracle Fusion, which you have 3 of, and pretty much after that, there's going to be nothing you really top deck. I mean, you can top deck like an E-Hero and just kind of try to beat him down, but if your opponent has a field, pretty much the only card that I would say that can really get you back in the game is going to be Miracle Fusion, or if you're playing Mirror Match, perhaps, and you just have an extra card in your hand, you have like Super Poly, that can make you come back as well. As well as just Super Poly in general just being really good in E-Heroes, even in the main deck. Once we get that Dark Elemental Hero Fusion, I think that E-Heroes will probably main deck Super Poly a lot more. Currently I've been seeing most of them just main deck 1, or some of them don't main deck any at all, but it's going to be very good once that Dark E-Heroes come out. So, next up, I just wanted to talk about the Bubble Man variant. Like, you can play Photon Thrasher, but Photon Thrasher is not an elemental hero, so you cannot add it to your hand with, like, Emergency Call. So, Bubble Man variant is pretty good. The only thing I don't like about Bubble Man, it forces you almost to play Starlight Road. I know that you can OTK them, but if they have a Gorge and you don't take that into consideration, and you just walk into a Gorge, and they drop a Gorge with a 4,000 token from a Heroic Champion Excalibur, because you were attempting to go for an OTK, and they stopped it with a Gorge. The problem with playing the Bubble Man variant is you'll have no cards in your hand, and it pretty much means you'll probably set everything, and at that point they can Heavy Storm you, and then they can take really quick advantage over the game, because Heroic Champion Excalibur only has this effect essentially once, because it only lasts until your opponent's end phase. So then they'll have a 4,000 token, and that is kind of hard to deal with, unless you have a ton of E-Heroes banished and you have out the Elemental Shining. So keep that in mind, that the Bubble Man variant is still good. As long as you get that OTK, it's pretty good. But just personally for me, I personally like Photon Thrasher, even though it's not an E-Hero. It also deals with Thunder King. And I wanted to also talk about things that hurt E-Heroes a lot, because I've been playing E-Heroes, and I've noticed that there are some things that hurt a lot. And I'm going to go through those cards really quick. So, first off, I want to talk about Snowman Eater. Now, a lot of people cite this card for Dino Rabbit, so be expected to see this card cited if you are playing E-Heroes. And what this does is, when it's flipped, it destroys a face-up monster. And so, it's actually a mandatory effect as well. So, if Snowman Eater is the only monster, you have to destroy itself. So, I'll read it to you guys. It's, when this card is flipped face-up, target one face-up monster on the field and destroy that target. It's not a flip effect either, so keep that in mind also. It does not have to be flipped. It's just the effect of it. It's not a flip effect. And the reason why it's really good against E-Heroes is, realistically, there's nothing that you can just summon on the field that runs over a 1900 defender. And pretty much, you're going to generally summon first turn. You're more than like 90% of the time, you're going to go for Stratos. You'll run into this, and you already net +1 off of Stratos, so it doesn't hurt too bad that you lose your Stratos, but then dealing with this 1900 defender, you pretty much are forced to Miracle Fusion to get over the Snowman Eater, which, or Exceed. You're forced to kind of go for a card to essentially deal with Snowman Eater, which already netted them a plus because it essentially got rid of your monster. Another thing that hurts E-Heroes is like something like Bottomless. Early on in the game, if you have like a whole bunch of like conditional cards, like I would say Gemini Spark or Hero Blast, and you have like one Alias in your hand, the rest is all Spell and Trap, and you go Summon Alias, and they go Bottomless Trap Hole. And then you have a whole bunch of dead cards. Unless, obviously, if you have the Gemini Spark, during the time that they have the Bottomless, you can chain Gemini Spark because it's a quick play. So keep that in mind. If your Alias gets Bottomless, just chain the Gemini Spark if you have it, and you'll be good to go. But the thing is, like, if you draw into the Gemini Sparks later on and your Alias was already banished, and you just have a whole bunch of cards that like are like Hero Blast and Gemini Sparks, it can hurt. And most of the time, though, the thing that hurts the most that gets Bottomless is like the Shining. My Shining always gets Bottomless or Deprisoned, and that does hurt quite a bit. Another thing that I've been noticing is people are side decking Super Poly without even like having any heroes in their main deck. So this card is amazing in Mirror Match. However, people are starting to side this instead of like the Snowman Eaters against heroes. I mean, Snowman Eaters are a great card as well, but the thing is, E-Heroes are going to be very popular. And the thing with this card is, when you have two monsters on the field, like you're going to go for an Exceed, they can just go Super Poly, and they can actually go for one of their cards. But some decks will not have room. Like I would say windups probably don't have the room to put in all these extra fusions. But certain decks like maybe Gladiator Beast, they'll have a tons of room to put in the fusions for their extra decks. So then they'll probably be more likely to side deck the super polymerization against it. So that's my opinion on E-Heroes. So I think it's relatively inexpensive. I think it's good. It's kind of medium to play. I would say it's relatively simple, but keep in mind, again, it's just that Gemini Spark. You have to know when to activate this card, and that's the most important thing. It can top deck relatively well, and it can top like a tournament. So that said, that's my opinion on E-Heroes. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comment section below, and for the next video on Is This Deck Good, we can talk about the other deck that you guys want to talk about. And if you have any suggestions for E-Heroes or other plays that you think are good, please let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, guys. Asian Eyes White Dragon, signing out.